Welcome to the Sales Lead Dog Podcast, hosted by CRM technology and sales process expert Christopher Smith, talking with sales leaders that have separated themselves from the rest of the pack. Listen to find out how the best of the best achieve success with their team and CRM technology. And remember, unless you are the lead dog, the view never changes.
Welcome to Sales Lead Dog. Today we have joining us Emme. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the Chief Revenue Officer. I've been in sales my entire career. And about a year ago, I had connected with a group of investors who had just purchased and just began spinning up this social media platform technology called Sue. Very quickly after having met the CEO, I realized that this was something that was not only just needed in the marketplace, but was also very timely. As I'm sure you and your listeners are aware, social media has become incredibly important in the ecosystem of how people communicate, how news and information gets disseminated. But the other thing that was a really important phenomenon is that we've now emerged into sort of social media 3.0, which is the professionalization of content creators or the professionalization of influencers. You know, social media 1.0 was how do you connect the world, right? How do you reconnect with old friends and kindergarten teachers, and how do you sort of stay connected with your circle of friends? The next iteration was mass distribution. You saw news outlets, you saw people, you saw brands that were using social media as a way to get their messages out to the masses because it really was adopted by billions of people across the world. This next iteration, of which we're on the threshold of, is that content creators out there, those that are, creating content on YouTube or your funny memes on Twitter or short form content, they're looking at social media not only as distribution, but as a way to actually commercialize their IP or to commercialize their content. And so what Sue is all about is that we're a social media platform, and it's a very similar model to sort of an Instagram or a Facebook or a Twitter where, you've got a feed of content, people can post things onto their profile, you're aggregating followers and friends, and we're monetizing our platform through ads, just the same way that they are on other social media platforms. The difference is that we are actually revenue sharing. So the revenue that we generate from the ads, we are actually paying back in a 50-50 revenue share with the content creators who are posting that content. And it's a simple principle based on fairness that content creators or influencers, and I use that term to encompass the large, enormous content creators out there, artists and athletes and professional content creators, all the way down to the small micro influencer who is, taking pictures of landscapes or creating video content about healthy cooking recipes, and they have 500 to 1,000 people that they distribute that content to. So it sort of runs the gamut completely. And so we've democratized that so that everyone, regardless of your size, is able to monetize your IP, like your actual content that you spend money and you spend time and you spend resources developing. So
it's a great incentive for everyone to get involved with social media as well.
That's right. And so, for some people, it will be an extension of careers that they're building. I mean, these are artists and athletes and names that you see all the time, and they might excel on the basketball court or the football field or in front of an audience of 100,000 people, but they also create content and they're using social media as a vehicle to monetize that, all the way down to the side hustle, the person who says, hey, listen, can I put $50 or $150 in my pocket every single month, which for a lot of people around the world, that makes a difference.
Oh yeah.
It pays for groceries. It pays for your car insurance, and so, so it's nice to be involved in an organization that is sort of democratized that business on a revenue share model.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Thinking back over your career, tell us about the person who's had the most impact on your success.
Oh, that's probably an easy one. And it was my first boss coming out of college. And so I came out of college in the late 90s, and this was sort of the beginning of the beginning of the dot-com boom, dot-com 101. And I had found a job in San Francisco working with a digital media company. And it was my first experience in sales. It was actually a client services role. And I got a level of mentorship at a time where I needed every little nugget of wisdom to understand the business of sales. And that mentor, that boss of mine, spent a lot of time making sure that I understood the context of a lot of the things that we were doing. It wasn't just a client call, but the client call had an objective, or, we're going to be upselling, and this is what this upsell process is going to become. And, I just remember oftentimes being on a conference call and we were together in a room, and she would deliver the ask, and then she would look at me and she would just put her finger to her lips and say, "This is the time when we're quiet. Get comfortable with uncomfortable silence, because this is where we've put the ask on the line." And that was just something that for my entire career, as I became a sales leader and potentially a mentor to other people, these were the same lessons that I learned from her. I found myself repeating to people on my team.
When you were going through that, did you realize what a gift she was giving you?
Not at all. Not at all. And it's amazing, because you realize how great sales leaders are and great mentors are when you don't have that mentorship. Right. And so, and I think both good and bad is it was my first experience out of college. And so it set me on a trajectory that allowed me to see and reap early success in my career. But then I started to expect that from other bosses and from other mentors. And when I didn't get it, I ended up finding that I had to sort of seek it out. Right. And that was another lesson, was to sort of never be without a mentor or guide in some capacity within an organization.
That's great advice. What are the top 3 things that have helped you the most in your career?
So I think the first one boils down to essentially just resilience. So this is the idea that, I hear no more often than, and I've got my kids who I ask to do things and they say no. And I think it's that resilience that I learned in sales that actually allowed me to be actually a better father. But, we face no all the time. And to be able to sort of take a moment, brush yourself off and get back to it, that I think is one of the most powerful tools that a young salesperson can meet. The other lesson was putting myself in the shoes of my client. So it's not about what I want, it's about what they want. And so I even do things, little tricks, like I never begin sentences with the word I, right? The subject of the sentence is never me. It's always, your recent marketing campaign was really impressive. I'd love to talk to you about how we can complement that, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it really was about being able to turn it around, do the research, and identify what are the probable needs of my client and adjust my approach based on what they need versus what I need. And then I think the last thing is, it kind of is in line with the first one, but I heard this very early on in my career, which was persistence breaks down resistance. And that goes along with the lines of resilience. And it's not to necessarily be the annoying salesperson that just continues to call and call and call, but that it takes more than one outreach to find the angle or find the opportunity or find the nugget of information that helps you present your solution in a way that makes sense for your client. So, that resilience of brushing yourself off, that ability to think in the shoes of your client, and then the opportunity to just have the willingness to kind of go after it and kind of knock on that door more than a few times.
Right. And do you have a third?
Oh, so well, I was going to say it was the resilience, it was the perspective of the client, and then the
perspective. I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah, persistence.
Yep. That's awesome. How would you advise someone who has the goal of becoming a CRO? That's their end goal. What's your advice?
Right. Yeah. So, obviously I think that the sales career, the trajectory of a salesperson is fairly baked, meaning that you usually start your career in client services or some sort of inside sales role, then you get into an outside sales role, then you get into some sort of managerial role where you might be a player coach, and then you get into regional management. And so, as you are moving in that career, you shift from being a salesperson who is sort of singularly focused on their book of business to becoming actually an internal salesperson. And what I mean by that is that when I'm in sales leadership roles, my clients are my salespeople. And so what is it that I can do to make their jobs easier? What internal hurdles can I block for them? What distractions? How can I help them ideate? What is it that I can do, whether it's prospecting, helping them build a deck, helping them with their presentation skills? What can I do to make my sales team more effective, which ultimately helps me? But you shift from being an outside salesperson also to being an inside salesperson, where you're selling into and you're working with the salespeople on your team in a way. And then sort of that last step is when you get into a CRO, that's really sort of executive leadership. And so that next level, I think you really have to be way more in tune with the needs of the overall business rather than simply just the sales function of the business. Mm-hmm. And it's not just sales and marketing, but you understand how operations work. You understand how tech works. You understand how manufacturing works. You sort of need to be, a guide of the sales organization so that they see what the company does holistically rather than simply just the selling of a product or a service. Right.
Tell me about your decision to pursue your first sales leadership role. What drove that?
Yeah, I was actually lucky. So I had been working in some large organizations. I've been working at Microsoft, and then I worked at Yahoo, and I had the opportunity to work at a startup where obviously startups afford a lot of opportunity for growth. This was early in my career, and I was hired as the first East Coast salesperson. This was a West Coast-based technology company. So I had the opportunity to build a region, build a reputation, hone our pitch, identify who our buyer was, identify the needs and the unique characteristics of a buyer that we needed to go and sell to. And then as we were more successful as a company, and as I was successful in my region, it became obvious that we needed to hire people. And given the fact that I had sort of laid the road, it almost became a little bit of a default where I would hire people and then they would sort of look to me for guidance. And I went from being a salesperson to a player coach to then over a 3-year period to becoming sales leadership. Not necessarily by default that I was the most tenured person there, but because I sort of evolved into that role of helping others become successful at their job. And that's kind of how it kind of happened, a little bit organically rather than sort of being captain saying, okay, you're now the boss and you lead these people. So, plus when you hire somebody, you sort of have that affinity, right? Somebody looks at you as the sort of the natural leader anyways. And so there was that unspoken bond that we had, and then it just emerged over time. So I was lucky in my transition from sales to sales leadership.
Right. If you're looking at, if you're considering a sales leadership position at another company, a new company, what do you look for to say, yeah, I want that job?
Yeah, and I think this is sort of natural in career trajectories, is you kind of want more. And it's a little bit of a curse of a salesperson in a way, is you want more. And so what has been really alluring about this particular role. And again, it's a startup where you have an opportunity to take on more and more responsibility. But what I've really enjoyed about this role as a chief revenue officer is the idea that marketing rolls into me. So it's not necessarily all brand marketing, but it's user acquisition, it's customer acquisition, it's client services, it's customers. So I've enjoyed the opportunity to hone my skills from a marketing standpoint. Not that I'm the CMO, but to hone that entity of it, where I'm not only selling to our clients in a B2B environment, but I'm also helping to procure users in a B2C environment.
Right.
And so, if I were to ever leave, or if there was another role that was out there, I would want to have the opportunity to take on a little bit more responsibility than I have right now.
Right. Awesome. How is being a CRO? What's that like or how has it changed for you in this era of COVID?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that, obviously we're so accustomed to the world of Zoom, and we're so accustomed to living in sort of this virtual world. The biggest challenge for me has been that I miss the sort of the off the cuff, impromptu brainstorming sessions that tend to happen around the water cooler. Or, you go up to somebody's, I'm a big walker and talker. So I like to, in between meetings, I like to get up and I like to kind of walk around. And in some cases I might be distracting people, but I like to kind of check in on people. I like that impromptu conversation or chit chat where they, meaning my team or other people in the organization, will often use that as an opportunity to, clue me in on a challenge they're having, versus the world of Zoom where everything is scheduled and there's generally an agenda. And so, I don't know, I feel like I miss out on that impromptu conversation that ends up happening within an organization. So I think that's been challenging. I think from a straight sales scenario, there's so much you glean from an in-person meeting, whether it's the casual chit chat before the meeting or the conversation at the end of the meeting about what someone's doing over the weekend, or you say goodbye in the lobby or something like that. Those impromptu type conversations are awesome times to grab nuggets of information or to solidify a relationship. And that's a little bit of a void. You jump onto a Zoom, you have the conversation, the Zoom meeting ends, and you walk away. So I think it's a challenge for salespeople nowadays to build those relationships, both inside an organization and with your clients, when you don't have those impromptu opportunities.
Right. What's your advice for a sales leader that realizes they have problems with social media? What do I need to do to fix it? What's your advice?
Yeah. I think social media is an incredibly powerful tool. When we think about Twitter and we think about LinkedIn and we think about Facebook and Instagram and Sue and any of these platforms, is that all of them have their own voice. And so oftentimes in the world of business, LinkedIn becomes that vehicle that I think a lot of people use. And so, I would definitely want to make sure that you understand the platform and the tone of the platform in what you're going to say, right? So it seems to be more familiar on Facebook and Instagram versus more professional on LinkedIn. I also think that those that are the most successful using a platform like LinkedIn or any other platform is a level of authenticity, right? It is like, don't just say it to say it. Don't just post so that you have a cadence out there. There's too much noise. And so I think that the real advice is try to be poignant and valuable in your posts, rather than simply just trying to get your name across somebody's desk, let's say,
Yeah.
They're powerful tools.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's a tremendous amount of clutter, and posting for the sake of posting, that's a huge mistake. It really has no value. It's got to be about value. You're better off doing one post a month if it's really got some valuable content that you're going to get a reaction out of and being able to connect with people versus hitting them every day with something that's just going to fly by them.
with something, right? And nowadays, the LinkedIn platform has become a little bit more of a spray and pray. I mean, I think we've all become victim to, people just sort of saying, hey, you seem like someone I should be connected to, or do you want to buy this? Or do you want to buy that? And it just seems like they spend no time trying to get to know you, and you become sort of an automated number to them. And so I would try to avoid that, especially in a sales environment where you are trying to sell, but don't be doing it in such an obvious way. And I think that value-driven, authentic voice is actually going to be more attractive to others than that force bullhorn approach.
Yeah, I got some great advice from someone that I was working with, where she said, when you're connecting or trying to engage with someone on LinkedIn, pretend like you're at a cocktail party and you're talking to them. Build a relationship first. You never just jump right in when you meet someone at a cocktail party and say, let me try to sell you something. You start talking to like, where are you from? What's going on today?
Right.
You get to know the person.
And I think people do want to talk about themselves. And if there is a level of commonality or a connection or something, you're exactly right. What brings you here to this event? How do you know David? How do you, build that camaraderie. And then, if there's the right time, then you can maybe turn it into a little bit more of a business approach. That's great advice.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about your success habits. Are there things you do every day that you've just built as kind of your foundation?
Yeah. And I believe that as a salesperson, even if your paycheck comes from a large organization, that you run your own business, right? And one of the things that is freeing about sales, but it's a double-edged sword, but there's also a pressure to it, is that nobody really tells me what to do. I mean, obviously you have this overarching number or quota, and there's an expectation of activity generally that needs to happen. But ultimately you run your own business. So if you don't have the discipline to have a routine, just like a small business owner, just like, let's say, a dry cleaner, if you don't open your door at 8:30 every morning and you close at 6:30 every day, how do you expect customer loyalty, right? How do you expect any sort of consistency if sometimes you're closed, sometimes you're open, sometimes you're responsive? So I'm very diligent about being at my desk at 8:30, and I generally have a cup of coffee in my hand. I do a little bit of research. And what I do is I write the really important emails that I need to think about. I spend the time from 8:30 to 9 when nobody else is bothering me, and I write those emails that need to be thought out and need to be 7 sentences or less, that prospecting thing. And I want to hit send by about 8:55, because generally when people come into the office, I want to be in that first tranche of emails before their day has gotten too busy. Right. So I do my prospecting in the morning, first thing, I'm fresh, cup of coffee, no one's bothering me, and think about those emails.
Yep.
And then generally the rest of the day gets kind of, especially in sales leadership, kind of gets taken over by other people. So your boss ends up calling and asking for a report, or you've got, challenges that some of your salespeople might come in. So the only time that you own is generally that early morning and that late night. And I don't like sending emails to prospects or clients late at night or later in the afternoon.
Right.
So I do a lot of my outbound stuff in the morning.
Right. As a sales leader, you have to have a way to measure success. How do you measure success for yourself, and how do you measure it for your team?
Right. Yeah. And that's a great question. I think there's a lot of tools out there. I think there's a lot of softwares and techniques that essentially allow you to track activity, which I think is really important. You can't control outcomes, but you can control activity. And unfortunately, in the sales organization, people are generally assessed based on the outcomes, but an outcome is not something anyone can control. What they can control is activity. So when I work with my sales team, I talk a lot about activity, whether it's sending those emails or following up, or or product demos or meetings or coffees or whatever it is, whatever that activity is that generally leads to the outcomes that you want, which is the receiving of an RFP, the submitting of a proposal, the acceptance of proposal, the renewal. So we in sales get so focused on outcomes, since that's the basis of our jobs and our compensation, but I tend to focus a lot on the activity.
Okay. Yep. At this point, you mentioned technologies, so we're going to transition and talk a little bit about CRM. CRM, do you love it or do you hate it?
Can I say both?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
a lot of
good.
people do.
Yeah. Okay. Because so it's really interesting. As a salesperson, I did not like CRM because it became sort of a burden, right? It became a sort of a forced habit. It became a responsibility, right?
Yep.
And even in sales leadership, a lot of what you're doing is you're telling people update your CRM, update your systems. I need to see the numbers. I need to see the numbers. As I'm in my business right now, I absolutely love it because it allows me to make data-driven decisions and allows me to give data-driven recommendations, right? I mean, if I start to see that somebody's got great activity but bad outcomes, then I can start to work with him or her on making sure that that activity is actually honed in the right way, with the right cadence, to the right people, with the right messaging. Or if I see somebody that has no activity and no outcomes, then it becomes something where the solution becomes a really easy one to have and stuff.
Yep.
And also in sales leadership, where we are judged and our team is judged based on outcomes, it gives me additional data points to potentially buy time for maybe a new salesperson, or explain that a new book of business needs a little bit more time to develop before the expectations of outcomes are there. So if I don't have that data, which now more and more senior leaders and CEOs are way more data driven and rely on the data, it's not just anecdotes anymore.
Right.
That those CRM systems are so vitally important to be able to understand how we service our clients, but also how we're getting to the outcomes that we want.
Yep. So when we work with clients, with our CRM clients, getting the frontline people to engage with CRM and make it part of their daily habits can be a struggle at some places. Yeah. And our recommendation is, lead with a carrot. And I think one of the most successful carrots is giving them a why. Why this is important to you and the organization, but it's really why it's important to them. Because salespeople, it's really, they need to understand what's in it for them. What's your why? What's the why for the salespeople at your organization?
Yeah, and I like your approach to that, and I do think that rather than just simply telling a salesperson or beating them into submission in cases right. like that, if you do give them that carrot and that why, which I think is really important, I think you're going to get the activity that you want. We have a limited amount of time, simply put. Right. And we're lucky enough that we have generally an unlimited amount of prospects, but we have no market awareness whatsoever. So rather than playing the spray and pray game, right. every single outbound communication, every single sales effort that we have needs to be well thought out so that we can maximize every minute of our day. Because there's nothing like sending out 250 emails and getting no responses, right? So the more we track that activity, the more we can allocate our time to the activities that generate the best yield. So for us, it's yield management, right. which is sort of a nerdy way to think about it. But like yep. we have a finite amount of time and we have a finite amount of responsibility and outcome expectation. And so we need to generate as much yield out of our time as possible. And if you don't do that in a data-driven way, then you'll spin yourself into frustration. And then it's like this vortex where you start doubting your ability, you start doubting your confidence, you just don't know what you're doing. You're just seeking a yes in some capacity. And so, sales is a beautiful career, but it can also be very dark in some cases. So, yeah. And I think your point is very valid that the why is focus on the areas that's going to generate you the greatest yield. Yep. And if it's retail clients versus CPG clients versus agencies versus clients, If you understand that through the data, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of finding joy because you found your niche of clients that for right now are interested in Sue.
Yeah, that's awesome. If it's not working out, do you have a stick or another way of getting them to engage with CRM?
Yeah, and the other thing is every salesperson obviously is working in their business to hit outcomes that have compensation associated with it. Yep. The other thing though is, and I've been on all ends of this, is that a salesperson's career, you're only as good as your most recent quarter. You're only as good as your most recent numbers. You always have that number next to you, and that can be great or that can be a challenge. And every single time you achieve that number, it's gonna get bigger, right? Yep. And oftentimes we have bad quarters. We face challenges that are out of our control as salespeople. Budgets get decreased. The market goes into a slump and everyone cuts their marketing budgets. So if I can show data to senior leadership and say they're doing all the right things, they're just facing circumstances out of their control, I can ultimately buy time. And so, there are two big motivators for sales in general. It's hope and fear. Yeah. And so the hope is use your time in the most effective way possible to generate the greatest yield per minute and make a whole bunch of money. And that's hope. The fear is do this so that I can protect your job for another couple quarters.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, you mentioned something that I think is really important that, when we work with our CRM clients that it's very common where people like, oh no, I only put the deals in that I know we're going to close. Those are the only ones that go into CRM because, those have value. But you really miss out on learning from the ones you're losing. Right. Why are we losing? What are we doing wrong? I read a great article by a gentleman where he, at the end of the year, he sat down and created a spreadsheet of every deal that he lost and categorized them. And then from there was able to develop some identify patterns and then come up with some strategies when he saw those in the next year to turn those losers into winners. Right. And if you don't have the data, you can't do that.
Yeah. You're working in a void, and you're exactly right, because those that do it well learn from every no more than they probably learn with every yes in a way.
That's right.
Right. And I'd heard this from a boss as well too, is that sales starts when you hear no. And so when you hear no, but you don't understand why, or if you hear no and you go back to your data and say, you know what, the last time I heard no from a retail client, I said this and it turned it around.
That's right.
Rinse and repeat. And if you don't have that information, then you almost are, you're leaving those nuggets of gold hidden in your desk somewhere rather than exposed in a CRM.
You bet. What advice do you have someone who is struggling with their CRM implementation? They're not getting what they want out of it. What advice do you have for those people?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Oftentimes, and this is just my experience, is that there are generally resources at these companies, at the CRM companies, and with any software, and I've sold software before, is generally, your clients are using your software to 10%, 20%, 30% of the capacity. Right. And so I've found a lot of success and oftentimes a very willing client services person at our partner companies, whether it's CRM or other companies we rely on for our sales help, to say, listen, can you do another tutorial? Can you help me sit down and understand this or give a once over on to the team? And as much as everyone says, oh, I've got, a forced internal vendor meeting, right? Everyone gets at least one or two more nuggets of value out of that. And then they can they learn a trick that allows them to extract more value out of a CRM partner. Oh, yeah. So I would say rely on the client services organizations of your partners. who are willing to help you because they want you to get the most out of it.
That's right. That's right. We do that all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And a lot of times it's just trying to show them different ways to be more efficient in their use of the platform, because it's all about saving time. I need to cram more into my day.
Yeah.
So, Chris, we are out of time. This has been an absolutely terrific conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on to Sales Lead Dog. If people want to get in touch with you to talk and learn more about Sue, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn as well. My email address is just chris@susocial.com, which is TSUSOCIAL, susocial.com. Excited to talk to anyone about it. We're new enough and we're kicking off enough that I'm excited to hear from sort of anyone and happy to talk about sales all day long, as you can tell.
Yeah, I think you guys are onto something. I think it's a great concept, great idea, and it's very timely.
Yes, I hope you're right. We're reading the tea leaves as well too, and we think that the timing is right as well too.
That's great. Well, thanks again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
As we end this discussion on Sales Lead Dog, be sure to subscribe to catch all our episodes. On social media, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Watch the videos on YouTube, and you can also find our episodes on our website at impellercrm.com/Sales Lead Dog. Sales Lead Dog is supported by Impeller CRM, delivering objectively better CRM for business, guaranteed.